Now, to take this story forward, we have invited a face that many South African Formula One fans will be familiar with. Good morning, Sasha Martinengo, and welcome to Sports on Morning Live.
Oh, Busiwe, it is so fantastic to chat to you. Such an exciting time. I was there back in 1993 at that last Grand Prix at Kyalami, and everyone is keeping very, very quiet at the moment. We have to be a little bit cautiously optimistic, but things are looking very, very good for the return of Formula One to South Africa. It's wonderful.
Sasha, let's delve a little bit deeper into this discussion on Formula One possibly coming back to South Africa. When we look at it from a cost perspective, what would that look like in terms of hosting a race in SA?
Well, you know what, I think there are going to be many, many deals that are done at present between Mr. Domenicali and the South African investors and perhaps local government and even national government, which is required. The costs are extremely high, but the returns, and that's what people have to understand, the return, the amount of international money that will come into the country, the global exposure of Formula One is huge. It's like having a World Cup every single Grand Prix weekend. So, you know, the costs, of course, are going to create a lot of discussion amongst many, many players within government, with outside, in socio-economic areas as well. But we have to look at the bigger picture of what this sport can bring to South Africa, to motorsport in general, and to the country economically. I think it is something that we really, really need.
Indeed, and when we look at how Formula One is looking at having a 24-race calendar, of course, there are some doubts around China given the coronavirus situation there at the moment. But if it were to come to South Africa, where would we see this race likely take place? Do you think it would be a Kyalami Grand Prix, or could we be going to the streets of Cape Town for a street race? Where would it be and why?
Okay, I think the logistics of doing a street race in Cape Town, you've got the backdrop of Table Mountain, it would look fantastic. But first prize to me, and there on your screen, is Kyalami. It was bought over by Toby Fenter back in 2014. He spent a huge amount of money. It is a first class facility. There will be some minor upgrades that will have to be done to the circuit in order to get its clarification and verification as an Class 1 Grand Prix circuit, but they're not major changes. If you've been to Kyalami since the revamp, the place is magnificent and is world class. That is first prize. Kyalami is the home of South African motorsport. It has been since 1967, and it is the place to host a Formula One Grand Prix. Without a doubt, it has to be Kyalami.
And Sasha, we've seen how there has been some objections or outcries with regards to certain countries hosting a Formula One race. Do you foresee anything of that nature taking place with South Africa?
No, not at all. I think, you know, South Africa, we have our own problems, and we are all trying very, very hard to sort those out, and those are more socio-economic problems. But for the rest of it, I think the world wants to see Africa back on the map, and South Africa, because that is, you know, the home of Formula One motorsport, you know, with the greatest respect to all of our fellow African countries. And, you know, Vusiwe, just to tell you, I talk to a lot of Formula One fans all over the world. The excitement in places like Congo, in places like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Botswana is just immense with this announcement that, you know, Mr. Domenicali was in the country. I know that the FIA team were here 2 weeks ago doing a track inspection. So they are the people who are going to decide what is required at Kyalami. And then from there, of course, there's serious negotiation, there's big money involved, and that's where Mr. Domenicali and the various partners and players will be, you know, crossing the I's and dotting the T's, and hopefully an announcement comes up very soon. And who knows, I say maybe March next year.
That would be absolutely amazing, and also just bringing more people into the sport of Formula One. I mean, so many South Africans don't even know that we have a South African Formula One champion in Jody Scheckter. But Sasha, we cannot have this conversation about Formula One and not touch on Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion. I mean, we know that he's backing South Africa getting a race, but on the racetrack, it hasn't been what we expected given how last season ended. And we've seen his teammates, George Russell, putting in a bit of a gap between him and his more fancy teammate. But what has actually gone wrong this season with Lewis Hamilton and that car? And can there actually be a resurrection?
Okay, well, let me just start off by saying, I think it was 2010. I was very, very lucky to spend a whole day with Lewis Hamilton at Kyalami Racetrack before it was bought and redone. And we went around the track together, and he loved it. And he loved South Africa. And he's been here many, many times on different holidays, coming on safari. So he is very passionate about South Africa. And I think having Formula One in South Africa without Lewis Hamilton being here would be a travesty. So we've got to get this deal done, first of all. Secondly, he's a 7-time world champion. And yes, the season hasn't started great for him or Mercedes this year due to regulations. They have this huge problem of the car bouncing all over the place. But don't discount world champions, especially people like Lewis Hamilton. He will bounce back and he will get better and better. Mercedes are working around the clock to get that car suitable, more suitable for him to drive. There's discussion about this bouncing effect that it has medically and safety-wise on all of the drivers, which is something that they're going to have to figure out themselves. But don't discount Lewis Hamilton anytime. And don't forget, when people are at the top of their game, everyone always tries to knock them down. And, you know, Lewis is a 7-time world champion. And, you know, there's still lots more to come from Lewis Hamilton. I can promise you that.
We do look forward to that. And finally, Sasha, as we begin to wrap up this interview with you, Ferrari, they look like they have a quick car, and they certainly do have the drivers with Charles as well as Carlos. Since you are an admirer of the prancing horse, why are they not leading this moment in the championship? As we know as well that the principal is an engine man, but all of his engines blew up this past weekend.
Yeah, it was a terrible weekend for Ferrari. And, you know, after considering the way that they started the season, things have just seemed to be a little bit difficult for them, especially when it comes to their power unit. But I always say I would rather have a very fast engine that is slightly unreliable than a reliable engine that's not very fast. So they have to try and figure out what these issues are. It seems to be a heating problem that they have, so they've got to work out how to cool the engine down. And of course, they will really be hurting after this last Grand Prix. And after, you know, Barcelona, you know, Charles Leclerc had an engine failure. Monaco, they should have won the race. And Baku also, you know, both did not finish. And of course, we had the Haas team with the Ferrari power unit and one of the Alfa Romeos that also got struck by a malady. So there are issues for Ferrari when it comes to reliability, but I'm sure just as Mercedes are working hard, the Ferrari guys are also working really, really hard to try and fix those problems. And let's see this weekend in Canada, if perhaps maybe they resolve it and try and take the fight back to Red Bull.
Certainly, all we can say is we are loving the level of competition and the Formula One. Sasha, thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a blessed day ahead, and we will catch up with you as, of course, the developments unfold in terms of South Africa hosting a race.
Thank you very much, Busiwe. I look forward to, and I really hope that it becomes a free-to-air Grand Prix as well. So SABC Sport, go and do some negotiation as well, please.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Putting some pressure though on SABC Sport to ensure that we do have the rights if that Formula One race does come to South Africa. That's how we wrap up your sports bulletin in this hour.